the fuck did... Oh. Hello and welcome to So Much for Pathos, the show that repeatedly kicks bad movies in the nuts until they puke. I'm, of course, your detective. You know, for the last few episodes we've gotten a little bit dark in terms of subject matter, i.e. talking about things like the afterlife and school shootings and so on, so I thought I'd talk to you this week about something fun. Guns! Guns have pretty much been a staple of action cinema since Dr. No came along in the early 60s and kicked the whole damn genre off. They're hard, they're loud, they go bang, and they're a little bit phallic looking, like all of man's greatest creations. Anyway, the point of this segue is that I've got a fun little movie from 2007 to show you, but I seem to have misplaced the DVD. There it is.
Oh, hey, are we ready to do this?
Yep, case number 8 is a go.
Cool. What we're watching?
Shoot 'em up. I don't know about you, but I can't really find a way into this film.
Yeah, it's not exactly deep.
Yeah, I am assigned to this case and I've yet to let a movie slip me by, so I'm afraid we're stuck with it.
Right. Well, have you got any ideas? As a positive, the film isn't full of creepiness like Crank 2. It's got much more of a fun sense of mischief and mayhem. Like Crank 1. Especially the Looney Tunes references.
Mischief, you say? That's what we're going to need. Someone who specialises in this kind of thing. Sam? Call Loki.
Hello?
Hey, Mischief, how are you?
I'm good. What's up?
I'm just working on a case at the moment and I need an assistant.
Oh, cool. What's the case?
Shoot 'em up. You want him?
Okay, sounds like fun.
Oh, goody. So now we have a B-movie aficionado on hand. We're ready to investigate Shoot 'em up.
And for those of you wondering what Shoot 'em Up is, I got you covered. Shoot 'em Up is a 2007 action movie released by New Line Cinema from writer-director Michael Davis, best known as a producer on the 2 Crank movies.
Oh dear.
The story goes that back in the late 90s or early 2000s, Michael pitched the movie to pretty much every movie studio under the sun before being turned down as the tragic events of Columbine High School Massacre had only recently occurred and nobody was interested in making that particular type of bloody-stained action movie just yet. So Michael Davis had to sit on it for a while and in the meantime make a few fairly bland rom-coms. However, when the time came to re-pitch the movie back in 2005 to convince people to go through with the project, Michael Davis put together a few flash animations of all the action scenes to demonstrate what the movie would look like. Said animations impressed New Line Cinema boss Bob Shea, who approved both the screenplay and Michael Davis's expressed desire to direct, and the movie was greenlit to begin production in February the 16th, 2006 to meet a September 2007 release. Despite getting some overall pretty decent reviews from the mainstream press, the movie sadly underperformed at the box office, grossing $12.8 million, which is roughly $12 million shy of its $39 million budget, and Michael Davis has yet to make another feature film since.
So I guess that's our way in then. Why hasn't Michael Davis been given another opportunity at Hollywood?
It's certainly interesting given that filmmakers whose films gain cult status more often than not still have film careers.
Yeah, ask me about Sam Raimi's career one of these days.
It's intriguing. Well, firstly, let's look at what he made. So Shoot 'em Up's opening introduces us to Clive Owen, who ostensibly plays the man with no name, referred to under the pseudonym of Smith. He's dragged into the story when one night, sitting to himself at a bus stop, interrupts a murder at the hands of a cocky henchman, saving a pregnant woman in the process. However, after the rest of the henchman's pals join the party, headed by Paul Giamatti as Hertz, the pregnant woman dies shortly after giving birth to her child during a gunfight, and Smith is subsequently left with a gun in one hand and a baby to protect in the other. Smith then has to get to the bottom of why Hertz wants the baby dead by doing a lot of shooting at them, then being the bad guys, and their blood goes up the wall. So you notice that the title has neatly encapsulated everything you need to know about the story.
As premises go, in terms of trying to set up a succession of wall-to-wall action scenes, it certainly does the job alright.
And that's kind of what Shoot 'em Up is at its heart. A fun action romp for the adolescent popcorn crowd.
However, I do get the sense that Michael Davis has ambitions beyond the dopey premise that he's allowed himself, but before we discuss, let's introduce the key players. We've already met Smith and Hertz, but our third central character comes in the form of Monica Bellucci, a woman of the night named Donna, whom Smith needs to feed the baby. He meets her in a brothel converted from an old church. Sam?
Yep.
Explain that.
Okay, I can do this. Old churches are often situated on pretty valuable inner city real estate, so when they're lying empty, the owners, be it the Catholics or Episcopalians or whoever, are normally keen to sell them off as soon as, unless they're architectural landmarks or something. Of course, once it is sold, they have no control over any future resales, so a few years down the line, a church building can end up being used for pretty much anything. Yep, it's true. It's not interesting, but it's true. Although I am pretty sure the whole reason for having the brothel in an old church is just so that they can have a set-off that visual gag with the backless nun.
Our three characters meet when Hertz shows up and interrogates Donna using his smoking gun barrel before Smith saves her ass, introducing us to the first of many Looney Tunes references.
What's up, Doc?
Oh, you're a wascally wabbit. But you're not wascally enough.
Yeah, for some reason Michael Davis is going for a Bugs Bunny Elmer Fudd motif.
Hertz gets taken out temporarily as Smith and Donna flee to Smith's place for safety. So there we go, our three characters are off in a cat and mouse chase across a running time of 1 hour and 20 minutes.
So you've got Clive Owen playing the man with no name, Monica Bellucci as the busty exotic woman used primarily as eye candy, Paul Giamatti as the cunning and devious bad guy, and loads and loads and loads of action. All they really need now is Samuel L. Jackson to turn up as a sassy FBI agent and go, oh hell no, and well, the list of exploitation credentials is complete.
But that's the thing, Shoot 'em Up doesn't exactly go down that road. The script is a tad smarter than your average bear. Hear me out? I mean, don't get me wrong, Shoot 'em Up taken as a whole is incredibly stupid, but there's a kind of knowing sense of its own stupidity that makes it work. The fact that the premise is about a guy with a gun trying to save a baby from a group of nasty henchmen, which in of itself is a reference to that one sequence in Hard Boiled, is an amusing idea in the same way that it's fairly amusing to see Samuel L. Jackson on a plane with some snakes.
This is the good kind of silly. The kind that wants to make the audience laugh as hard as it's laughing at itself. Along with its own knowing laughability, Shoot 'em Up attempts to round the typical action movie mainstays with some interesting characterization. Not original characterization, granted, they are all pretty much genre archetypes, but interesting. Certainly more than you'd expect from a film that features multiple deaths by carrot. I'm not joking about that. We'll get to that later. Part of the fun of something like Shoot 'em Up is watching well-respected character actors ostensibly goof off in these kinds of movies. Paul Giamatti is the standout as Mr. Hertz, Hertz being one of those typical bad guy names, as he seems to be the one who's well aware of what silliness he's gotten himself in for. But the thing is, as well as every other actor in the film, Giamatti is playing his role totally straight. He makes Hertz feel like an actual person. I mean, ultimately his character is mostly one note, but he functions in the archetypal way that usually works in this type of movie. He frequently gets phone calls from his wife who wants him to come home as soon as his job is done, and these scenes are just nice little touches to his character.
I suppose that's the same for Clive Owen then, except in order to understand him, you need to get in tune with the idea that he's basically playing Chow Yun-Fat as Bugs Bunny. No, for real, that's what's going on here.
Essentially, Smith is your average, everyday, one-liner spouting, angry, impossibly skilled gunsmith, plucked directly from the action movies of yesteryear. But what makes him work is that Clive Owen absolutely believes in the character. His dialogue is appropriately cheesy, and if it were coming out of the mouth of a character in any other movie, it would make your eyeballs roll so fast you'd think that someone had just jammed a pudding mixer in the back of your head. But again, Clive is playing Smith completely straight-faced.
You son of a bitch! Eat your vegetables.
And it's the complete lack of irony in his delivery that makes it so funny.
And it just piles on more evidence for me that Clive Owen is damn fine as an action lead.
But as mentioned, all the characters at least have something interesting going for them. Hertz makes for a good villain, as his character is born out of the brainy yet despicable archetype. But there are a few moments where Paul Giamatti is allowed to play with him a bit, because the script allows him to. We learn that he has a wife who wants him to come home.
Sweetie, this deal is almost done. Look, I've already booked my flight home. Okay? Okay. I love you too. Yeah. Bye-bye.
And that he also worked for the FBI at one point.
He was once an FBI profiler.
Forensic behavior consultant. My God. How many times do I have to tell you guys details?
That's not just for the villain either. Smith gets a good look in too. He has a tragic past, you see. His wife and son were killed in a diner robbery. Smith inadvertently caused it by selling the shotguns to the armed thugs who did the robbing, which is kind of close to a motivation as you're going to get for why his main target towards the second half is a massive arms manufacturer.
Which could mean that Shoot 'em Up is quite possibly the most ironic anti-NRA movie ever made.
But to be honest, a character-driven art film isn't exactly why you're here to see it. You want the thing that all adolescents want, guns and violence. And with that, shoot 'em up certainly provides. The action sequences are actually really creative and rather well designed.
Albeit they'd fucking better be, seeing as how many of them there are. Seriously, there's like an action beat every 15 minutes, so if you're looking for a solid story, you may as well bugger off. As a majority of shoot 'em up mostly consists of Clive Owen running around doing some shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting before stopping to have a quick cup of coffee and go back to doing some more bloody shooting.
Yes, but there is something here that's very meta. Both Hertz and Smith seem to acknowledge that they're in an action movie, with Hertz debating if he's a terrible villain and Smith saying this line:
I hate those lame action movies where the good guy calls just one person who ends up betraying him.
If Smith is acknowledging that even the double agent role is a cliche, then it's actually a clever example of meta-theatricality, even though it does happen to him sometime later in the movie, if not as explicitly obvious. I think if you took away this meta feeling, the movie will probably lose some of that comedic tone it's got.
Funnily enough, there is a plot in here somewhere, but you'd have to squint pretty hard to see it. Basically, it turns out that the guy behind it all is a senator called Rutledge. For now, we'll call him Senator Rutledge. So Rutledge is running for president, but he's also dying and needs a bone marrow transplant to save his life. However, bone marrow DNA is hard to match, so Rutledge set up an operation to donate his sperm, implant it into women, and when the babies are born, then harvesting the bone marrow for a transplant. Which I'm pretty sure is the most beautifully fucked up conspiracy plan in a movie I've ever heard. Hertz's employer is an evil gun magnate named Hammerson, who hates the senator's anti-gun rhetoric and wants him out of the way. But rather than just expose his sinister baby breeding clinic to the press or something, which would end his career and serve their purposes perfectly well, he opts to moderately increase the senator's chances of dying of cancer by sending his men to wipe out the baby in the most public, over-the-top way possible, with wave after wave of black-jacketed grunts.
The best way to deal with this situation is of course to shoot every motherfucker in the room before diving headfirst out of the plane, in a scene that takes some inspiration from Moonraker of all things. Yes, he's Bond as well as Bugs Bunny, dispatching goons on the way down. He's then captured by Hertz and tortured for information, which Smith doesn't have, as he sent Donna away with the child with no knowledge of where she went. Of course, the movie has to end with some kind of grand showdown, so with two handfuls of broken fingers, Smith and Hertz engage in a shootout, which Smith wins by placing bullets in his hand, sticking them in a furnace, and then firing them off into Hertz's chest. Is that even possible?
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, I thought not.
The movie ends on a high note. Smith somehow manages to find Donna working at a diner with the child in her possession. They kiss upon re-meeting, and Smith saves her when a gang of junkie robbers try to hold up the diner, effortlessly taking them out with his consistently superhuman aiming skills. Which in a way is meant to mirror the fact that his old family died in the same way, except this time Smith is able to save everyone, and thus continue on his new life with a new woman and a new baby to look after.
So that was Shoot 'em Up. Guys, what do you all reckon?
Overall, it was quite fun in a ridiculous sort of way.
I quite liked it too. Shoot 'em Up is a funny, if yet weird action movie. Giamatti makes for a humorous and convincing villain, whilst Clive Owen's persona as the blunt and dry-witted Smith makes him the perfect lead for this movie. Its comedy is dry and delivers punchlines that don't rely on gimmicks, but rather punny one-liners. Of course, it has to add to the standard Hollywood action formula with some kind of romance plot or sex scene with the hero. But here, there's so much cheese you can spread it on a cracker, and it makes the most of it by sending up the modern action movie's most typical type of scenes, such as the obligatory sex scene between the hero and love interest, by turning up the volume to absurd proportions by making that particular scene a shootout as well. Overall, I enjoyed it, and it's a good satire on Hollywood action movies.
Satire, you say?
Well, yeah, do you not agree that the movie is kind of clever?
Well, I agree, but I wouldn't go as far as saying satire, and if you'll indulge me, I'll explain what I mean. Truth is, I do like Shoot 'em Up. Its bloody and comic attitude to its own premise earn itself a special place in my heart. However, even though I did say earlier that Shoot 'em Up is clever and functions as a comic roasting of every action movie prior to 1995, calling it satire just doesn't really describe what Shoot 'em Up is. You see, there's a very fine line between satire and parody, and an even finer one between parody and reference. Parody is defined as being an imitation of something but in a comedic version. I'm pretty sure we can all name a good example. Satire, on the other hand, is basically parody but with a message behind it, and I'm not entirely sure what Shoot 'em Up is trying to say beyond simply look at how many action movies I've seen and let's all laugh at them. And because of that, Shoot 'em Up fits more comfortably underneath parody, or failing that, reference. Reference, of course, being simply referring to something similar for comic effect. Basically what I'm saying is that as clever as Shoot 'em Up tries to be, and let's just be clear, it is kind of clever, and I also think that Michael Davis is actually quite a smart guy, the movie itself just doesn't really have anything to follow up on its own observations. So the movie basically says, isn't all this gun-filled carnage kind of stupid, and then proceeds to not really say much else. Keeping in mind though that the script was written in the late 90s and didn't really change much until it was greenlit in 2005, Shoot 'em Up seems to exist in the realm of the Scream-style self-referential movies that became popular back in the late 90s. And it doesn't really make the movie smarter per se, it just attempts to elevate the movie above its own station to a position that it frankly just doesn't deserve. Ultimately, Shoot 'em Up is a good movie, and it functions best when it embraces its own airheaded charm, but anything other than that is kind of pushing it.
There's a question, actually. What makes this movie any different to Crank 2, which you guys hated?
I can answer that. Crank 1 was an enjoyable film, very similar to Shoot 'em Up in that it's a giant, mad action film pastiche that you have to approach prepared for plenty of overblown nonsensicality and good-natured femininity. It was outrageous, it was gratuitous, but all in the service of having fun. In Crank 2, Neveldine and Taylor were trying to go further, while rehashing the same basic story, and you ended up with an overdone version of film 1, with the wacky elements becoming jarring, the scatological moments becoming basically nauseating, and somehow this persistent, deeply unpleasant theme of racism and misogyny running through the whole movie, which kills the fun and is all the more uncomfortable because it doesn't feel at all knowing or satirical. Of the two, Shoot 'em Up is like Crank 1. Crazy fun for people who know action films are silly, but like them anyway. If Davis made a sequel, Shoot 'em Up 2, in which he had almost the exact same plots, but with every joke taken too far, where Smith makes racist comments the audience is expected to laugh at, and where Donna has no feelings or ideas of her own and gets treated with contempt by Smith throughout, then you'd have something like Crank 2. Just compare these scenes between the two films.
What happened to you, baby?
Forget about it.
Tell me.
My pimp hit me in the stomach. My baby was delivered stillborn. Get off of me!
Whereas,
Hey, Chocolate, did you get off your fat ass and get dressed?
Why?
Is Doc Miles gonna have to choke a bitch?
which film would you honestly rather see? But with all that said and done, I still need to ask, why hasn't Michael Davis made anything since?
Well, I personally think that Mischief said it right there at the beginning. Box office. That's actually a big issue I have with Hollywood generally speaking. Years ago, Hollywood was the place where the lonely, weird and disenfranchised could be able to express themselves and live happily. It was either that or the circus. The deal was that Hollywood producers would allow people to make whatever their artistic little hearts desired, provided they were actually making money. This is still very much the case today, but the problem is that as Hollywood productions always insist on having the prettiest visuals and dumping ridiculous amounts of money into CGI, which only really serve to push production costs several $1 million on the wrong side of uncomfortable, movies these days are staggeringly prone to bombing harder than ever, and it puts people's careers seriously in jeopardy. Now, I'm not saying that this is entirely the producer's fault, as especially the more artistically inclined of filmmakers demand big budgets to fulfill their ideas to the fullest extent. Cough, Man of Steel cost $220 million, cough. But what I'm saying is that far too much blame gets put on the filmmakers for mistakes that the executives make. I mean, let's face it, Shoot 'em Up was greenlit in 2005, most likely because the producers had just seen Sin City get away with bloody murder at the box office that summer. Ultimately, it feels like New Line were trying to capitalise on Sin City's grim and darkly comic vibe by making Shoot 'em Up, but utterly failed it in the marketing. They opted to go for a guerrilla-style marketing tactic, attempting to create underground hype over the film's release, preemptively trying to give it cult-like status amongst people who were eager to see it, even go as far as creating a fake website advertising bulletproof baby accessories. But what I feel Shoot 'em Up really needed for it to be a success at the box office was a bigger release. It got tucked away in September of all things when it really needed something closer to the summer. I mean, they usually move stuff around in the release schedule because they don't want to compete with anything, so what came out in 2007 that, oh dear.
So at this point, it appears that Shoot 'em Up's best chances are on DVD at the moment, and if you're into this kind of thing, then we urge you to check it out if you haven't already. It's a rare example of movies that actually embraces something most action movies don't do these days. It has fun.
Agreed.
So that's Shoot 'em Up for you. It's a fun, dopey action movie for all you little tykes out there. It's getting the Constantine recommendation. Beer, friends, wallowing in just stupid fun. And on that note, I call that case closed. I'm Matt Crowley.
I'm Sam Lightwing.
And I'm MischiefLoki.
And that was Shoot 'em Up, and he's hoping for Michael Davis to make another film.
But before we sign off, we would just like to make some small acknowledgement of the real stars of Shoot 'em Up, and the role they play in making all of our lives better in so many different ways. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Carrot.
Beautiful, man.